The seating chart had been the final insult in a long line of them. I stared at table 17, literally next to the kitchen doors, while my sister Vanessa's wedding coordinator pretended not to notice my expression. The main ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and cream-colored roses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Family tables clustered near the elevated head table like courtiers around a throne. Table 17 sat in the shadows, half hidden by a decorative screen. "It's just logistics, Claire," Vanessa had said 3 weeks ago when I'd asked about the seating arrangements. "Richard's family is huge and we have to prioritize couples. You understand." I'd understood perfectly. My younger sister was marrying into the Wellington family. Old money, social connections, and the kind of respectability that came with 5 generations of lawyers and politicians. I was the family embarrassment. 32, unmarried, working some vague government job, nobody really understood. Mom had been more direct during the rehearsal dinner. "Try not to draw attention to yourself tomorrow. Richard's mother is very particular about appearances." She'd glanced at my simple dress with thinly veiled disappointment. "And maybe borrow something from Vanessa? Something more wedding appropriate." What they didn't know, what I'd been legally prohibited from telling them, was that my vague government job was a senior position at the State Department's protocol office. For the past 8 years I'd coordinated diplomatic visits, managed international relations and advised on matters of state that would make their society wedding look like a backyard barbecue. The secret clearance helped. So did the non-disclosure agreements. My phone buzzed in my clutch, the secure diplomatic line, not my personal cell. I excused myself to the bathroom, ignoring my cousin Jennifer's smirk as I passed. She was seated at table 4 with her husband, close enough to hear the speeches. "Adeyemi," I answered quietly in the marble-tiled restroom. "Ms. Adeyemi, Her Royal Highness's motorcade is 15 minutes out. She's asking if you received her gift." Ambassador Chen's voice was crisp and professional. "I did. Please convey my thanks." The gift had been a handwritten note on palace letterhead, expressing condolences that protocol prevented the princess from attending the ceremony itself, but confirming she'd arrive for the reception. "Everything's arranged on this end." "Excellent. Security sweep is complete. See you shortly." I checked my reflection. The simple navy dress Mom had criticized was actually Armani, chosen specifically because it photographed well and wouldn't outshine the bride. My grandmother's pearls were real, gifted to me by a Saudi diplomat's wife after I'd helped navigate a particularly delicate cultural situation. The shoes were practical Stuart Weitzman because I'd learned the hard way that diplomatic functions required comfortable feet. I looked exactly like what I was, a professional who knew how to dress for international relations. My family just couldn't see past their own narrow definition of success. When I returned to the reception, the wedding party was making their entrance. Vanessa looked beautiful in her cathedral-length gown, Richard handsome in his custom tuxedo. His parents, the formidable Margaret and Charles Wellington IV, surveyed their son's wedding with satisfied expressions. Their family table, table 1, held a senator, 2 judges and Richard's uncle who sat on the board of 3 Fortune 500 companies. My table held Vanessa's college roommate's parents, 2 distant cousins I'd met once, and an empty chair that spoke volumes about where I ranked in the family hierarchy. The speeches began. Richard's best man told embarrassing college stories. Vanessa's maid of honor, our cousin Jennifer, waxed poetic about true love and finding your perfect match, with a pointed glance in my direction that made several guests turn to look at me, sitting alone in the shadows. "Some people are lucky enough to find their person young," Jennifer continued, her voice syrupy sweet. "Others, well, we all have our own timelines, don't we?" Polite laughter rippled through the room. Mom smiled tightly. Dad studied his champagne glass. My phone buzzed again. 2 minutes. I stood and walked toward the entrance hall, ignoring the coordinator who tried to redirect me back to my table. The venue's event manager, Marcus, met me near the doors. He was the only one I'd briefed about the situation, sworn to secrecy with the kind of authority that made him take me very seriously. "Security's in position," he murmured. "Holy hell, Claire. You could have mentioned you knew royalty." "Need to know basis," I replied calmly, watching through the glass doors as 2 black SUVs pulled up, followed by a Rolls-Royce with diplomatic plates. "And Marcus? Let it play out naturally." Don't announce her. His eyes widened. You want me to let a princess just walk in unannounced? She requested it specifically. Trust me. The security detail entered first. Discreet, professional, scanning the room with practiced efficiency. Then she appeared. Her Royal Highness Princess Amara of Kenyatta, third in line to the throne, international advocate for women's education, and my close friend of 6 years. We'd met during her first official visit to Washington. I'd been assigned to her delegation and we'd bonded over late-night strategy sessions and a shared passion for international development. She'd invited me to her brother's wedding. I'd helped her navigate a potential diplomatic incident involving a racist comment from a European official. We'd vacationed together in the Maldives, kept in touch across time zones, and she'd been the first person I'd called when my grandmother died. She was wearing a stunning emerald gown, a diamond tiara, and an expression of regal amusement as she surveyed the wedding reception. Claire. Her voice carried across the ballroom, cutting through the music and conversation. There you are. Every head turned. Princess Amara crossed the room with the kind of grace that made people instinctively step back, her security detail flanking her. She walked past table 1, where Margaret Wellington's jaw had dropped, past the head table where Vanessa sat frozen with a fork halfway to her mouth, past all the important family tables, straight to table 17 by the kitchen doors. She embraced me warmly, kissing both my cheeks. I'm so sorry I missed the ceremony. Affairs of state, you understand. But I couldn't miss celebrating your sister's wedding with you. Behind her, Mom had actually stood up from table 2, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and dawning horror. Your Highness, you didn't have to come all this way, I said, following the script we'd discussed. Make it natural. Make it clear. Nonsense. After everything you've done for our country's education initiatives? After you personally coordinated my mother's state visit last year? This is nothing. She glanced around the room with raised eyebrows. Although I am surprised they seated you back here. In my country, the diplomatic liaison to the royal family would be seated with the honored guests. The silence was deafening. Richard's uncle, the board member, had gone pale. As someone who did international business, he clearly recognized both the princess and the implications of what she'd just said. Marcus appeared, suddenly professional. Your Royal Highness, we weren't informed. That is, we have a table prepared. I'll sit with Claire, Princess Amara said firmly, settling into the empty chair at table 17. Although perhaps you could bring the champagne from that main table? It looks significantly better than what's been served back here. One of the distant cousins at my table looked like she might faint. Vanessa had stood, her face flushed. The wedding coordinator was frantically whispering to Mom, who was whispering to Dad, who was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Claire. Vanessa's voice shook slightly as she approached our table, Richard trailing behind her. You didn't mention you knew, that you were friends with. You didn't ask about my life, I said simply. You assumed because I'm single and work for the government that I wasn't important enough for a good table. We should have been informed of your guest, Margaret Wellington interjected, having rushed over with the kind of speed that suggested panic. If we'd known royalty was attending. I'm not a guest, Princess Amara said coolly. I'm Claire's friend, and I came specifically because she told me this was a small family affair. I wanted to celebrate with her. She paused meaningfully. I'm so glad I could witness how her family treats her. Richard's face had gone red. As a corporate lawyer who'd just made partner, he understood exactly how badly this could go. Ms. Adeyemi, Claire, perhaps we should rearrange the seating. We're quite comfortable here, I said, sipping the considerably better champagne that had materialized at our table. The view of the kitchen is quite charming. Jennifer had approached, her earlier smugness replaced by confusion. Claire, I don't understand. You never said you worked with... we all thought you were just some low-level administrator. You thought wrong, Princess Amara said with devastating politeness. Claire coordinates diplomatic relations for visiting dignitaries. She's advised on international treaties. She holds security clearances most government officials will never achieve. She's brilliant at her job and I quite literally trust her with matters of national importance. She turned to Vanessa, smiling sharply. Your sister helped stop a diplomatic problem that could have hurt trade between our countries. But I guess that's less exciting than flower arrangements, right? Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. The guests stared. Phones came out. The wedding was turning into a public disaster. Mom rushed over, pleading, "Claire, sweetheart, this is a misunderstanding." "No, Mom. You sat me by the kitchen because you're embarrassed by me. Because I don't fit your idea of success." Kept my tone calm. "You've always dismissed my job because you can't brag about it. Because senior diplomatic liaison doesn't sound fancy enough." Dad joined us, looking lost. "We didn't know." "You didn't ask," I said. I looked at Vanessa. "I would have told you, but you made it clear I wasn't important. Just an obligation." Princess Amara stood up. "I think Claire and I will take our champagne on the terrace. The company here is disappointing." As we walked out, chaos broke behind us. Mom whispering about what people would think. The planner trying to fix things. Guests gossiping. On the terrace, the princess smiled. "Too much." "Perfect," I said, finally smiling. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for the show," she teased. Then, more softly, "I'm sorry your family treated you that way." She raised her glass. "To found family, the ones who truly see us." "To found family," I said back. My phone buzzed. Vanessa's wedding hashtag was trending, for all the wrong reasons. Photos of Princess Amara at my table. Videos of the speech and her entrance. Captions like, "When you disrespect the wrong guest at a wedding." Inside, I saw Vanessa and her husband talking to worried relatives. Mom and Dad looked small and lost. I turned off my phone. "They'll try to make up now," Princess Amara said. "They'll want your connections." "I know," I said, watching the city lights. "But that's not how it works. You can't treat people like they're nothing, then suddenly care when you realize their value." "Boundaries," she said, nodding. "Very diplomatic." The doors opened. Vanessa stood there, crying, makeup ruined. "Claire, I'm so sorry," she said. "I've been awful. I just wanted to impress Richard's family. I was jealous of you, your confidence, your independence. And I thought your job didn't matter because I couldn't brag about it." "It does matter," I said quietly. "And so do I. Because I'm your sister." That should have been enough. Vanessa nodded. "You're right. I know an apology isn't enough, but I'm truly sorry." I looked at her, my perfect sister who'd just learned a hard lesson. "I accept your apology," I said. "But here's the truth. I won't come to family dinners where I'm treated like a disappointment. Either you value me or we keep distance. That's my boundary." "I understand," she whispered. "And I'll do better." Princess Amara squeezed my hand. "I should go. But remember, you have family who loves you as you are. They just might not share your DNA." After she left, the wedding limped on. But the damage was done. The gossip would spread. The Wellington's perfect image was cracked. My phone buzzed again. A message from Ambassador Chin. "The foreign minister requested you for the European summit. Promotion papers are being prepared. Congratulations, Deputy Director Adeyemi." I smiled, looking out over the city. They'd seated me by the kitchen because they couldn't see my worth. But the world had better tables. And I'd already found my seat.
Nick married Jolie 3 years ago, but to be honest, he wouldn't have married her if she hadn't become the sole owner of her father's business after his sudden death. Her father, a seemingly young and strong businessman, had died unexpectedly from a stroke. Jolie, as Mr. Macmillan's only child, inherited his entire fortune. This is why Nick, a handsome slacker accustomed to living off women, paid attention to her. Jolie was captivated by Nick's charming promises, while he planned to stay with her only until a more profitable opportunity arose. But it soon became clear that Jolie was the jackpot of his life. She inherited her father's colossal wealth, and Nick knew exactly how to take advantage of it. He believed he could easily manipulate her deep affection for him to control her fortune. Everything was going perfectly for Nick. The girl was deeply grieving. Her father had been her pillar of support and the most significant person in her life. So Nick quickly surrounded Jolie with care and support during this hard time. The young and naive girl was unaware that the worst moment of her life had spurred Nick to hide his true nature even more, at least until their wedding. He maintained his good behavior, ensuring there was no turning back. After the funeral, he proposed marriage, suggesting they wait until her mourning period for her father was over. Nick was adept at deception, manipulation, and pretense. He could become whoever he needed to be and do whatever was expected of him. With his wealthy girlfriends, he typically didn't put in much effort, thinking there would always be another wealthy woman. With Jolie, he knew it was worth it. His efforts would not be in vain, and the cunning man clearly understood it. However, the first hurdle for him came unexpectedly from a source he couldn't have foreseen. Jolie's father had a best friend who was also his main deputy in the company and godfather to Jolie, Mr. Chinland. He understood right away that Jolie was head over heels in love and wouldn't be dissuaded from marriage. Her grief over losing her father made her seek a replacement. But as an intelligent and shrewd man, Mr. Chinland categorically insisted on a prenuptial agreement and managed to win Jolie over to his side. "Nick, it's for business. Is it that hard?" Jolie asked, repeating what Mr. Chinland had told her. "This is humiliating. Do you think I need your money?" Nick retorted, indignant at this turn of events. "Honey, it's just a formality. We only need it in case of divorce. My godfather really wants us to sign it. He's always been like a second father to me," Jolie explained. Jolie may have been naive about financial matters, given that she'd never had to worry about money, but she wasn't a fool in other respects. When she set a goal, she achieved it, no matter what. Nick was pinned against the wall and had to agree to all of Mr. Chinland's terms. The marriage contract formulation was standard but completely curtailed Nick's rights. It was evident that the business and all other property inherited from Jolie's father could not become joint property of the spouses. Nick assumed he would receive a share in the dividends and acquire new property and assets. However, the contract, drafted by a top-class lawyer, prevented Nick from having this opportunity. Despite this, Nick believed the marriage was still beneficial to him, as he would access his wife's finances without control and build up capital for the future. He planned to take money from the common budget daily and transfer it to his name, but Nick was mistaken in this regard too. Mr. Chinland was a dedicated, decent, and responsible person who not only controlled Jolie's financial flows in business, but also her personal finances. Nick had limited funds for personal expenses, but nevertheless, he remained optimistic about the future and waited to see how the situation would develop. Soon, his patience was indeed rewarded. Jolie had been trying to conceive since their wedding day. She desired motherhood, but each new cycle brought bitterness and disappointment. Initially, she attributed it to nerves and stress caused by the frantic pace of life. Taking the business into her own hands and learning on the go was naturally exhausting. After more than a year of unsuccessful attempts, Jolie sought help from specialists, underwent a full medical examination, and identified the cause of her failures. The symptoms she had attributed to a busy lifestyle turned out to be alarm bells. Her body had been warning her of problems, but she had ignored it. Finally, the doctors diagnosed her with cancer. She underwent almost 2 years of treatment and suffering, but with little success. All this time, Nick played the role of husband only nominally. His vested interest was that Jolie simply did not exist, and he had not managed to hide it well enough. Although they never openly discussed it, Jolie was aware of the numerous women her husband had cheated on her with. Nick believed he was adept at conspiracy and manipulation, thinking he was successfully playing the role of a dying wife's husband without arousing suspicion. He felt lucky and thought he only needed to endure a little longer to achieve his desired outcome. However, Nick's behavior was condemned and discussed by everyone, from the nurses in the hospitals where Jolie was treated to Mr. Chinland. The man was furious and helpless. He couldn't comprehend why Jolie would desperately want to preserve her marriage on the brink of the grave. He was also worried that Jolie had no will, which meant her husband would automatically become her only heir. That scoundrel would inherit everything, including the fruits of Jolie's and her father's hard work, which would be for nothing, an exercise in futility. Mr. Chinland was sure that Nick, this Waisel, would squander all the property within a few years. However, the elderly man was at a loss on how to broach such a delicate subject with his goddaughter, who until yesterday emanated health and youth and now had no chance. She was dying, and it would happen in the very near future, counting down to weeks. Nick was already rubbing his greedy hands, his eyes burning with anticipation of getting rid of his frowning and sick wife and acquiring a solid capital. It seemed to him that the matter was in the bag. Mr. Chinland prayed that he would not have to start a conversation about the will himself, but fortunately, it was not necessary. Jolie started the conversation herself. Her secret left him speechless because she had planned everything meticulously, with finesse and a ruthlessness he never expected. Revenge is truly a dish best served cold, and Jolie executed it flawlessly. The way Jolie came up with and realized her plan did not take much effort and time, but she completed her journey here on Earth, realizing her main dreams. Unfortunately, Jolie's loved ones did not witness a miracle, and she passed away without recovering. She had arranged the details of her funeral with great care before her death, serene and resolute. She clearly conveyed her final wishes. The day after the farewell ceremony, the notary called the people mentioned by Jolie in her will and asked them to arrive for its announcement. Nick was shocked by this news. He was sure that his wife had not drawn up any official document in case of her death, and that he would become her sole heir, as the law usually provides in such cases. Still hoping for the best, he went to the appointed meeting, taking his new mistress Shirley, a striking beauty. Upon entering the notary's office, Nick spotted Mr. Chinland and Jolie's friend Kurt Turgan. But what caught him off guard was that Kurt wasn't alone. He was pushing a stroller with a baby boy inside. Nick was completely unaware of Kurt's marriage or the birth of his child. Although Nick wasn't an expert in any field, he certainly wasn't foolish. It didn't take him long to realize that there was a hidden agenda at play and that he had been outsmarted. Despite this, curiosity overwhelmed him. He wanted to know what Jolie had devised, even though it was already evident that it would be something incredibly humiliating for him. For approximately 15 minutes, everyone remained silent, occupying different corners of the room. No one else arrived. The notary seemed to have deliberately prolonged the introductory part as much as possible, explaining why they had gathered and what an honor it was to read the deceased's last will and testament. Even then, Nick could tell by the wicked grin on Mr. Chinland's face that the contents of the will were a secret only to him. Finally, Nick heard his name. "To my lawful husband, Nick, I deny the inheritance," read the notary. After reading this modest and short sentence, the notary looked at Nick and asked if he understood the essence of what had been said. The humiliated man had no choice but to nod. At that moment, Shirley took his hand and tried to get up to leave defiantly, but Nick held her in place. She looked at him with a questioning gaze that he ignored. He himself would have wanted to leave the scene of his public humiliation as quickly as possible, but the play was not over, and the invited audience needed to see it through to the end. After a brief pause, the notary proceeded. "I bequeath all my personal property to my only son, Robert Turgan. Until he reaches adulthood, I appoint his father, Kurt Turgan, and Mr. Chinland as guardians and administrators of his estate." A shocking revelation hit Nick like a... She hasn't been pregnant in the last 2 years. That's impossible. Nick desperately clutched at straws, despite realizing that being pregnant wasn't necessary to have a child nowadays. The godfather smirked, clearly relishing Nick's shock and disappointment. "The advancements in medicine these days are astounding," he remarked. Looking at this scene, Kurt remembered the horror he felt 2 years ago when he discovered that his best friend was seriously ill with little chance of recovery. It was shocking how calmly she spoke about her limited time and what she needed to do. That's when she revealed her desire to become a mother no matter what. "I had my eggs preserved before starting treatment. I was told that I probably wouldn't be able to raise my own child, but I insisted. Kurt, I grew up without a mother, and I know it isn't easy, but I always felt her love and protection. Does Nick agree to raise the child alone?" Kurt cautiously inquired. Who would allow him? He would gladly become a guardian and use the baby's money, as he lacks conscience. "No, I've already realized that my dear spouse is someone of questionable character, to put it mildly. His reaction to my diagnosis and prognosis. I don't even want to speak about him. This man isn't worth getting upset about." "And what about the baby?" Kurt asked. "That's what I wanted to discuss with you." Jolie hesitated, which was quite unusual for her since she was usually fearless. "I don't know how to broach the subject delicately. Maybe there is no delicate way. In short, I would like you to be the father of my child," she exclaimed in a high-pitched voice. Are you joking? You have a husband, Kurt said, clearly unprepared for this. Yes, I do have a husband, and I will have him until the day I die. I've already made that decision, Kurt. Of course, we won't sleep together. It's impossible given my current condition. I can't carry the baby myself, unfortunately. I had my eggs preserved. Now we need the biological material from the future father. Naturally, I also need a woman to carry and give birth to him, but luckily such services are available now. At first, Kurt thought it was absurd, the nonsensical ramblings of a desperate woman. Yet she had an entire logical plan in her head and had already completed a significant amount of preparatory work. She had researched the legal aspects, arranged for reproductive clinic services, and even found a surrogate mother for the future baby. Kurt, I could use the services of a donor for the father, but I really want to leave a piece of myself behind. When you think about it, who will the baby be with? I've been thinking a lot, and you're the only one I can rely on. Knowing you for so many years, I believe that you will be a great father. I understand that you want to create your own family, get married, and have children. Naturally, it's logical. But please think about it. Don't answer me right now. For me, after what happened with Nick, it's critical that the father of my child is someone who doesn't prioritize money, someone who won't exploit my assets. I'm not as naive as I was before marriage. Nick taught me a lot, and now I have a lot of life experience. As for you, you don't need any money at all. You have plenty. My father has, Kurt replied, correcting Jolie's reasoning for the first time. You know you're going to get it. You work tirelessly to keep the family company thriving. You've never been needy. Now I know for a fact that a man who grew up poor will never stop thinking about having enough to eat, and if his decency is also lacking, there will be a big problem. I have experienced that firsthand, Jolie sadly added. To be honest, I'm completely confused. I had an entirely different idea of becoming a father. I need to consult my parents. Understand that I can't make such a decision alone. I will need the help of close family members when I become a father, so I have to inform them and ask for their opinion. Jolie had no objection, so she only requested that Kurt promise to keep the information a secret. The conversation with Kurt's parents was very difficult. His father neutrally accepted everything that was said, listened to all the explanations, and assured that he would support his son's decision and help as much as he could with his grandchild. His mother, however, was not as open-minded. Like all mothers, she wanted him to marry a good woman and have children together. She felt immense sympathy for Jolie. She had known her from childhood and thought highly of her, but this request was very difficult for a mother to accept. The potential grandchild's mother was dying, and the child would be carried by another woman. Can't the child get the disease? The woman dreaded this question, finding it awful, awkward, and out of place. However, how else could she ensure her grandson's safety? Jolie does not have a hereditary form of the disease, Kurt answered. This reassured the anxious woman to some extent, though not completely. Nevertheless, after careful consideration, she expressed her support for her son's decision. Kurt himself also struggled with indecision. Jolie's proposal caught him off guard, but after some period of contemplation, he concluded that there was no reason to refuse. When he conveyed his approval to Jolie, she was overjoyed, and they began implementing her plans step by step. While Kurt sat and reflected on the life-altering story, Mr. Chinland reminisced about the conversation with Jolie a little over 2 months ago. Starting from afar, she said that she honored Mr. Chinland as a second father and hoped he wouldn't refuse. Then she blurted out that she wanted him to become the guardian of her son. Initially, Mr. Chinland thought his goddaughter was delirious, but as Jolie shared the full story, he was left in shock. Not only had Jolie and Kurt made such a bold decision, but they had also hidden it for so long. How old is the baby now? Mr. Chinland asked. Robert is 8 months old, Jolie smiled. You both truly know how to surprise, Mr. Chinland explained, still processing the shock. I don't want Nick to find out about the child before I die. In fact, he will only find out when my will is announced. I've already had it drafted, and it's held with the notary. However, there's one aspect that still needs to be resolved. Robert will have only one parent. I've reassessed many aspects of my life, and I don't want to leave anything to chance. Kurt has parents, so if anything were to happen to him, Robert will go to them. But I want you to have rights too, just in case. Being good at understanding people, the elderly man sensed that it could be too dangerous to act against Nick like this, even though Jolie's husband fully deserved such treatment. Jolie, are you sure this is the way to treat your husband? He's a repugnant man, and involving yourself with him in this manner. I mean, why do you need such vengeance from beyond the grave? He expressed his thoughts, then immediately stopped himself. Sorry, dear, for being so rude. You know I've pondered this for 2 years. I witnessed Robert's birth, saw how Kurt loves him, and how his parents adore him. I require nothing else. I have accepted the situation. Currently, I am much more annoyed by those who speak to me about some mystical recovery and healing. As for Nick, I loved him so deeply. I believed in him with all my heart, but he turned out to be the most ungrateful beast. He comes to my hospital as if it were hard labor. Do you know his girlfriends brought him here? The elderly man silently nodded, bitterness apparent in his expression. And I should forget this? Absolutely not. He cherishes money above all else, so that's how I will punish him. It will be a surprise for him. You see, I kept everything from you. It was immensely difficult. I wanted to introduce you to my son right away, but I was exceedingly cautious that no one would accidentally find out and tell Nick. This may be my farewell to him. I even wrote him a letter. The notary will deliver it. Mr. Chinland made several attempts to dissuade his goddaughter. It seemed to him like an ill-advised decision, yet the woman maintained her stance, and he had to concede. After all, it was her final will, and it deserved to be respected. Amidst the sudden silence in the notary's office, everyone was engrossed in their own thoughts. Of course, you don't need to be a fortune teller to guess that Nick cursed Jolie in every possible manner. People like him have no inkling that they themselves might be to blame and that others' behavior could be a perfectly logical response. Yet such introspection is too complex for such people. Why bother searching for problems within oneself? Strangely enough, it was Shirley who brought a sense of perspective. Shirley interrupted the silence, trying to take her lover by the elbow to lead him out. However, Nick had no intention of leaving, as he had not finished speaking. Are you sure that I'm not entitled to anything at all? A mandatory share or whatever it's called. I am the husband, after all, he shrieked. Even Shirley winced at his behavior, let alone the others present. Only the elderly notary, accustomed to such conduct, remained unsurprised. According to the will, you are not included in the circle of persons entitled to a mandatory share in the inheritance. Moreover, I carefully studied your marriage contract. Its text is attached here. The notary patted the thick folder in front of him. You have no chance, even when appealing to the courts, although you naturally retain the right to such an appeal. Of course, I will dispute it. It's unclear who this illegitimate child really is, who she claimed as her son. Nick went on a rampage, not realizing what he was saying. Kurt struggled to restrain himself from punching the arrogant man, and even the usually calm Mr. Chinland flushed with anger. Only the notary remained as calm as a python. For him, this was a typical workday, and nothing was surprising. He calmly responded, attached here are not only the child's birth certificate, but also medical documents providing clear answers about his birth. Furthermore, as per the deceased's request, there is a DNA examination result confirming that your wife is the biological mother of Robert Turgan. I should inform you that all documents have been gathered completely and thoroughly. Can I see them? Nick demanded. No, you can only review the part that pertains to you. All other documents, especially those regarding the child, can only be disclosed with the parent's consent. Of course, I do not permit it, Kurt immediately interjected. So it's possible only in a court proceeding if the court deems it necessary to demand these documents, the notary clarified. This was the final straw for Nick. He stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him and vowing not to let this matter rest. His mistress, however, was more polite. She said goodbye and left quietly, closing the door behind her. Does it matter that he didn't sign that the will was read to him? Mr. Chinland asked the notary. There are many like him. It's nothing more than a formality, the notary reassured him. It would be funny if it weren't so sad. I still don't understand how Jolie got involved with him, Mr. Chinland said, his thoughts aloud, but his question remained rhetorical. The men quickly signed the necessary documents and shook hands. Mr. Chinland helped Kurt put little Robert into the stroller. Will you join us? I want to take a walk, get some fresh air, and it's good for the baby, Kurt asked. Certainly, I'll join for a while, Mr. Chinland replied. They walked in silence, listening to the rustle of the stroller wheels. Do you think Jolie would be satisfied with how I'm coping? Kurt finally asked, voicing what had been bothering him. I'm sure of it. You're a wonderful father, and it's clear to see how much you both mean to each other, Jolie's godfather reassured him. To be honest, there's one thing I can't get out of my head. You know, I think Jolie told you that I advised her against what just happened at the notary's office. Are you talking about this circus with the will and how Nick found out about Robert? Mr. Chinland nodded in response. Of course, Kurt replied. I was the one who constantly brought up the conversation about that. I didn't like this idea from the very beginning. He's a nasty type, angry, stupid, and mercenary. Why provoke him? Honestly, I even contemplated telling him when the baby was already born. Jolie was hiding it so much, I believed I had no right to. I decided that she just didn't want to deal with him herself, and left these disputes to us. Today, I saw him with that woman, showing no shame at all. Now I question whether I did the right thing by not insisting on my stance. His reaction, the expression on his face, it was horrifying. It would have been better to get rid of him earlier. I think Jolie didn't want to either. That played a part too. And revenge. She wanted revenge because she loved. Regardless of what she said later, she loved intensely, and this corrupted love found no other way out. My poor girl, the elderly man said, wiping a tear trickling down his cheek. Don't grieve for her. She'd asked us not to. She asked us to direct all our love, which was for her, to Robbie, Kurt comforted Jolie's godfather. While the men reminisced, Nick and Shirley watched from the car, discussing the same topic. So you won't get anything at all, right? The girl asked in disbelief, blinking rapidly. You're such a fool. You've heard that there are no chances because of this foundling. Okay, let's go. We need to take at least something valuable and move it to my apartment. 3 days later, Kurt finally mustered the courage to visit Jolie's house, only to find it empty. He had braced himself for a confrontation and even brought 2 security guards for protection, but Nick had already left, taking plenty of valuables with him. Now, Nick was sitting alone in the small kitchen of his tiny apartment, nursing a bit of whiskey. Shirley had left him, which was expected. Why would she need a beggar? As Nick pondered his current situation, he couldn't help but reflect on how he had ended up here. Before, women used to pay him to be with him, but now he needed to offer money to a young, beautiful girl to stay in her company. Ironically, Nick, a gigolo past his prime and deteriorated due to his vices, didn't blame himself for his circumstances. In his thoughts, his wife was the villain who had drained his vitality and dashed his hopes, leaving him without an inheritance. He had been so looking forward to the money. In his fantasies, he was young, handsome, successful, and extremely wealthy. But as a parting shot, Shirley had told him some harsh truths. No one needed him. He was just a poor drunkard living in delusions of grandeur. It was very difficult to come to terms with that reality. His dreams of wealth and success, largely contingent on his ex-wife, crumbled like a house of cards. His aspirations to be a successful businessman were dashed. Blinded by his ego, he failed to see his own part in his downfall. Instead, he blamed his deceased wife, whom he saw as the root of all his problems. Nick spent nearly 2 weeks in a drunken stupor, seeking escape from reality, and his resentment grew stronger each day. During one bleak, hangover-filled morning, he decided he had had enough. He realized that he wouldn't achieve success or revenge on Jolie by drinking. Nick felt deeply humiliated. A few days prior, men from Mr. Chinland had arrived and practically forced him to hand over his car keys, tearing up the power of attorney Jolie had given him. Didn't you know the power of attorney loses its legal force after the death of the person who issued it? one of the men said in a derogatory manner. In his mind, Nick saw himself as a saint who never left his sick wife's side. He conveniently overlooked his endless intrigues, gambling, alcohol abuse, and dismissive behavior towards his wife. What a pity that she's dead, and I can't hit her, he thought so many times. I barely restrained my impulse, encouraging myself that my patience would be generously rewarded. He began to ponder how he would take revenge on her and what he should do next. At first, he wanted to desecrate her grave, but then, contemplating what was dear to Jolie and what would cause her the most suffering, he saw another answer that was lying on the surface: Robert. Nick was struck by electricity when this idea came to him. He laughed viciously, having finally devised his revenge plan. Of course, there were many issues to resolve and structure, but he had decided on the main thing. He was not going to hurt Robert. What's a mother's worst nightmare? Not being able to help her child in trouble. That's precisely what he decided to do. The plan of his inflamed imagination was simple: kidnap the baby, take him far away, and leave him at an orphanage. For a week, thoughts of revenge and fantasies of it warmed Nick's soul, if he had one. He hadn't smiled like this for a long time. True, such a grimace looked rather intimidating and scary, but Jolie's husband didn't care at all. You could even say that he was happy as he thought through all the details. He experienced euphoria. The object of his hatred was not nearby, but Nick eagerly imagined how Jolie would suffer from her inability to help her child. Once he had settled on a plan, theoretically, he began to think about the practical side. He needed to find out everything about Robert's movements and those with whom he left the house to perfectly select the place and time for his crime. Nick had known Kurt well in his past and was even familiar with his parents, having visited their house. He also knew that their elite suburban settlement had enhanced security. As Nick began to contemplate his plan, he realized the challenges he would face. He couldn't predict how much time he would spend observing from the forest with binoculars, studying the child's daily routine and movements. Was the gain worth the candle? Absolutely, Nick reasoned with himself. His mental state had been noticeably affected after the announcement of the will. She ruined my life, and I will ruin the life of her child. A rich heir, he will live off the state's readiness, and his mother will watch from the other world, realizing she is to blame for everything. The man laughed maliciously. If an indifferent person had been near Nick at that moment, they would have noticed the drastic changes in his mind and taken him to a doctor. Unfortunately, history doesn't entertain hypotheticals. Nick was unmatched in achieving his goals. If he had a plan, no matter how foolish it seemed, he saw it through to the end. He spent 2 full days not just watching but preparing the necessary conditions for it. Nick scouted the entire territory to find the perfect vantage point. He needed a spot that overlooked the entire settlement, especially the Turgan house, while remaining hidden. The man devoted all his effort and time to finding a place that he deemed perfect in every aspect. For over a week, Nick rose at dawn and hurried to the cottage settlement, remaining there until late evening. He kept a constant watch with binoculars, recording every activity in the house, who arrived and when they departed. He diligently maintained a notebook to ensure he didn't miss anything. He found that the child was cared for by Kurt's grandmother and a nanny. Of course, Kurt and his mother were unsuitable for implementing Nick's plans. They both knew him well and could identify him immediately. Nick had no intention of being punished for the crime he had committed. He anticipated that the police would come to him with questions, but he hoped to wave them away. Therefore, the nanny was chosen as the victim of the attack in Nick's plan. She had a fixed schedule and always walked with Robert in the same locations along the same routes. Fortune favored Nick on Wednesday during her daytime walk with a peacefully sleeping baby. The nanny left the secured territory of the settlement. She followed a small forest path to a clearing where another nanny from a nearby settlement met her. They conversed, and Nick even heard their laughter. The man decided to stop watching the settlement daily to avoid attracting attention. He needed to remain inconspicuous. Now, he only visited on Wednesdays, trying to coincide with the nanny's daytime walk. Everything was precise, like clockwork. Each Wednesday, the nanny would leave the safety of the settlement and walk the forest path. For 4 consecutive Wednesdays, he observed the system to ensure it did not fail. On the fourth Wednesday, he knew he would return. The next week, at the same time, Nick prepared to execute his plan to take away the child. He purchased a powerful stun gun from a local market, paying cash to avoid being traced. He meticulously planned every detail to aid in avoiding capture. Similarly, he acquired an old car, stole license plates, and attached them to the vehicle. He strategically determined where to park the car, close enough for a quick escape, but not so near as to attract attention. He also took steps to disguise his appearance, altering his figure and face to avoid recognition. Thoughts of kidnapping consumed him. He went to sleep and woke up with these thoughts, even dreaming about the act in precise detail. As the appointed day approached, he lost nearly 7 kilos and became a mere shadow of his former self. A quick glance at him was enough to realize this was a man to be feared. Traces of neurosis and obsession began to etch themselves onto his face. On Wednesday, he parked in a pre-selected spot and waited. As he saw the nanny pushing the stroller down the path, he trembled. The extensive planning had disconnected him from the reality of his impending actions. He was about to confront a stranger, assault her with a stun gun, snatch the child from the stroller, and flee to his car. Nick had imagined the situation to be different, more like a scene from a video game. Here, however, everything was real: the woman, the baby in the stroller, and the baby examining his surroundings with curiosity. By nature, Nick was not violent, and crossing that line was difficult for him. But his deep-seated hatred for Jolie drove him to carry out his plan. He approached the nanny, pushed her away from the stroller, and knocked her down. Then, using the taser on her, she passed out from the shock. All that was left was to take the child out of the stroller and run to the car. However, things went awry. As he bent down to unfasten the belts, he felt a blow to his head and fell to the ground. The next thing he knew, an elderly man was standing over him, scolding Nick and tying his hands. Nick lost consciousness again. The mysterious man turned out to be a gamekeeper well known in the nearby elite communities. His guardhouse was practically in the middle, just beyond a clearing where nannies from neighboring settlements often gathered. His dwelling was concealed behind dense greenery and went unnoticed by Nick that day. Mr. Mayo had been returning from the local store when he noticed suspicious activity. "I saw someone standing guard, dressed entirely in black despite the morning heat," he later explained to the police officer. "I decided to watch a little and investigate." Due to his many years as a gamekeeper, Mr. Mayo was adept at moving silently through the forest to avoid alarming the wildlife. "I hid behind a tree and kept a watchful eye. Suddenly, I saw a man attack a woman, knocking her down. I initially thought he intended to assault her, but he was trying to reach the child. I rushed over and hit him with a stick I had picked up just in case," Mr. Mayo explained. "Good job, Mr. Mayo," one of the officers said. "You've become a local hero. Look, the press is already gathering. They want to interview you. Sign this police report and bask in your newfound fame." "No, I won't go to them. I don't care for that sort of thing," replied the gamekeeper, quietly walking back to his place in a roundabout way to ensure no one followed him. Mr. Mayo didn't feel he had done anything extraordinary. He believed anyone would have acted similarly in his position. How could he not assist when those who couldn't defend themselves were in danger? A few hours later, Kurt appeared at Mr. Mayo's house. "Hello. I am the father of the boy you rescued today," Kurt said gratefully, his voice filled with emotion. "He's a good kid. He calmed down as soon as I picked him up. Such a brave and intelligent boy. Thank you so much. It's a blessing you were there at the time. We're so grateful you didn't just pass by." Mr. Mayo, the gamekeeper, waved off Kurt's thanks with a modest smile. "There's no need to thank me. Who keeps score when a child's life hangs in the balance?" Kurt was on the verge of tears, overwhelmed with emotions from the intense day. "Tell me, how can I thank you?" "What are you talking about?" Mr. Mayo replied. "There's no need for thanks. But if you insist, a new hunting suit and maybe some food for my dog would be appreciated." "Of course, no problem," Kurt nodded. "By the way, if you don't mind me asking, was all this done for money?" Mr. Mayo's curiosity was genuine. "Oh, sadly, it's much more complicated than that," Kurt sighed. "Well, Feel free to share if it's not too much trouble. I live somewhat isolated here, in an information vacuum, so to speak. Kurt began recounting the disjointed events of the past years, the illness that befell Jolie, their unconventional parenting decisions, her subsequent passing, and the bitter aftermath involving Nick. The investigator informed me that Nick was deeply hurt. As everyone assumed, his actions were solely driven by greed. He was, in fact, consumed by revenge. Kurt felt relieved to share this complex story with someone seeking an unbiased perspective. I wonder if we drove him to this point. Are we responsible for his desire for revenge? Mr. Mayo's response was blunt and honest. Oh boy, are you serious? You're an adult, and you're talking such nonsense. That Nick of yours always found a reason. He doesn't even need one. He married for money, cheated shamelessly, mistreated his sick wife, and convinced himself it was all her fault. What's her fault? For retaliating once? For losing patience? For not enduring it? Mr. Mayo's words, though harsh, offered a perspective that uplifted Kurt. He deeply pondered every word spoken. Now, I also owe you for your good advice, Kurt smiled in response. The gamekeeper merely waved his hand. They parted as friends, and Mr. Mayo promised to check in on the boy. I heard somewhere that the Chinese have this belief or wisdom, God knows what to call it, that if you save someone's life, you're responsible for that person forever. So, don't worry about your Robert. I'll look after him here too, the gamekeeper said as a farewell. True to his word, Mr. Mayo regularly visited Kurt's house, becoming a welcome guest. For Robert, he became another loving family member. Meanwhile, Nick was sentenced to several years of imprisonment. During this time, the family managed to return to their usual quiet life, breathing a collective sigh of relief. Mr. Chinland continued to visit regularly, dutifully fulfilling his duties assigned by his goddaughter. Kurt, in time, met a single mom whose daughter attended the same kindergarten group as Robert. The children got along well, and Kurt's parents hoped this new relationship would bring stability and happiness to their son and Robert. As promised to Jolie, Kurt ensured Robert never forgot his mother. He spoke of her often, showing the boy pictures and videos, reminding him of her everlasting love and protection. Your mother loves you very much, and she is always with you, protecting and watching over you, even if you can't see her, Kurt assured Robert.